One example is change and stability. We see this in so many different flavors all the time in the workplace. Do we keep the product as is because it has customers, it brings in revenue, or do we change it because there's AI now? Do we want to disrupt this product that is profitable in the name of change and innovation? So in this polarity, just bringing a team together, the team that advocates for don't change a product that is stable and has a customer base, and the team that is more open to innovation and to change, and have them have a conversation about, but what is the greater good here? What is the greater purpose that we're trying to achieve? And then even just moving from their contention into more of a third way kind of perspective, that alone opens up a different conversation with these teams. Hello, Cori.
Hey, how's it going, Angela?
Hi. We're doing something different today. So today I will be the guest.
That's right.
And Cori is my host.
Today we're going to be talking about polarities. So you are the expert, Angela, in helping teams and leaders figure out this tension, this ongoing tension that never seems to resolve itself. So it's pretty common.
The definition of polarities is that there's two situations, two poles that are seemingly in conflict, in opposition to one another, but they're actually interdependent. One needs the other. And in other words, is the typical either or, this or that, we do this or that for these specific situations doesn't work. Because, that's problem solving, and that's great. There's a lot of situations where we can do that. In situations where we can't, those are polarities. These are situations where we get stuck, we get polarized, meaning there's one perspective, there's the other perspective, no perspective is better than the other. So that's the content, the topic of today.
Why don't you talk a little bit about your expertise in this area?
Well, thank you for labeling me an expert. I consider myself someone that practices polarities and tries to stay in these different rhythms of polarities. So let me start with how I actually came into studying polarities and learning about them, so that I can also give credit, recognize my teachers on this topic. In 2019, I went to Colorado to take the Polarity Mastery Fundamentals, an introduction to polarities and to the body of work of Barry Johnson. My teacher was Alison Conte, and it was in a context of leadership, of polarity leadership, and mastering polarity and helping leaders navigate these conflicts. And an example of this, which was the very first example back in 2019 of how I really got it immediately, was the polarity of inhale and exhale. When we talk about breath and the activity of breathing, can you argue that inhaling is better than exhaling or vice versa? No. Those are the problems that we're talking about today. There's no choosing one or the other. You need to understand both, and you need to understand the values of both and the fears or the downsides of both, because that's the situation.
Right. I was going to ask you about, is it like a dilemma or a trade-off? But of course,
Yes.
that example of your breathing in and out, you can't choose one or the other. You have to do both.
Yes. So dilemma is another way of naming, labeling these situations, dichotomies, paradoxes, as I mentioned, wicked problems. These are the situations where another expert in the field, Ron Heinfetz, who is a professor at Harvard, the situations where the technical problem solving does not help. You have to go into an adaptive mindset. In other ways, problem solving is, they're either or. That way of resolving situation is on one hand. And then on the other hand, there's other situations, these situations, where that doesn't work. And what you actually need is navigating from one to the other, or integrating one and the other, or an adaptive, we go back to that concept, an adaptive mindset or an adaptive leadership style. That's what we're going to double click on today.
Yeah, such an interesting topic. I think people don't necessarily know that this is labeled as such. They just call it a problem or an issue or a constant struggle. They don't know the language or the terminology or how it works, or that it's something that you have to navigate. Right?
Yes.
I think we're always taught that you're either right or wrong, or a leader has the say in making a decision. But talk a little bit more about this third way.
Yeah, that is another way, a beautiful way. It is the third way, or you could say better way, but I try to stay away from this qualification of, positive, negative, better, not good enough in this conversation. Because again, we go back to, it's a dilemma because it all goes. If the answer is this or that, and the answer is yes, this is the situation we're talking about. So when I learned this in 2019, at the time I used to be in leadership development at IBM, and part of the training for first-time managers, first-line managers, was leadership dilemmas. We would have a role play of situations where, again, you are trying to practice that mindset of refrain from trying to go with one solution over the other. These are situations, and I'll give some examples, but these are situations where that doesn't work. And so you can spend time trying to figure out what is better than the other, and then decide, oh, we're going to go this way. And we're all seeing those situations, right? It's like, oh, let's do this. And then 3 months later, you realize, actually, that was not the right way to do it. It was, we're going to go the other way instead. And then again, 3 months later or 6 months later, that is not the solution. And so a lot of times these teams in these organizations, they swing like a pendulum between one pole, one decision, and the other decision. Do we make a decision quick and fast because we don't have all the time in the world, or that's, you see the language, or do we go and do we take time and we make the decision? That's not, it's both end. You can make the decision and the decision fast, and you're looking at what are the values of this and what are the downsides. And then when you look at the other pole, what are the values of that pole? If we were to take the time that we need to take, and also the downside of that pole, that is the mindset that we need to have.
But unfortunately, I think people look at it, it's almost a trap, right? Looking at it as one solution, that's the solution, the other one's maybe a constraint.
Yes, right.
Versus looking at the values and, like you were saying, there's a systematic way to think about it.
Absolutely. There is a systematic way, and there's a framework, right? And that's what helps. So in those leaders' dilemma, when I brought this way of following the rhythm of what is the best situation and making a situation that we go back to the third way, maybe making a situation that is not just a compromise, is not what's in the middle of one and the other. That's not how you do it. It's either a framework that helps you create, first of all, a greater good statement. Barry Johnson calls it the GPS, the greater purpose statement. So you're on one pole, another, for example, one example is change and stability. We see this in so many different flavors all the time in the workplace today. Do we keep the product as is because it has customers, it brings in revenue, that's the major profits, because most of the time, if the product has been running for a while, is very, very profitable? Or do we change it because customers want something new, because there's AI now? Do we want to put an AI engine in it? Do we want to disrupt this product that is profitable in the name of change and innovation? So in this kind of dilemma, in this polarity, just bringing a team together, the team that advocates for don't change a product that is stable and has a customer base, and the team that is more the R&D team that is more open to innovation and to change, and have them have a conversation about, but what is the greater good here? What is the greater purpose that we're trying to achieve? And then even just moving from their contention into more of a third way kind of perspective, that alone kind of opens up a different conversation with these teams. And then the mindset to have there in the way that you facilitate a conversation, in the way that you participate in that conversation is, again, there's no right or wrong. We're all right and we're all wrong at different times. And so bringing the team to consider what are the values of not changing a product. They're always there. And if you get for too long on a product that does not change, what are the fears? What are the downsides? There's always, right? Customers.
Right. Or the costs.
The cost. It's obsolete.
We're a business here. Yeah. It's
exactly. You lose customer base. They think you're obsolete. They want something that is, more at pace with the way that they change. So, and so that's one aspect of this conversation, one rhythm of that conversation. Then we go on the other rhythm, on the other pole, and what's the value of a product that is always on the leading edge, that is always changing, that always has the latest thing? Think of AI now, the new model, the new LLM. And when you're there, what's the downside of always changing things? What's the downside, the cost for the client, the downside to the team, to your production, to your sales teams? So that is also part of this conversation. So you see how in this mindset now, we have these 4 quadrants, and they're all important, and they all need to be part of this conversation.
Right. Now, and I can tell, it sounds like if one side of the room is pushing on one pole and it's going too far, that's where a lot of the tension happens.
Yeah, and it happens all the time. Yeah. It happens all the time because for several reasons, but one of them being it's human nature. You touched on something really important there, that too much of one thing or not enough or one of the other thing, that's the imbalance. Yeah. That's usually what happens. We stayed for too long on the strategy, the planning, and we really missed on adapting and executing, right? Being and doing is another polarities that, we can very well relate with in all sorts of life. And so that is how you bring it into the conversation, and you stay in that dance. So we call it, navigating polarities. It's just to help people understand that aspect of adaptability.
Now, would you say that polarities live at the team or organizational level? Both?
Yes.
Yes.
Both and?
Both and.
Yes. Individual and team is a polarity. Imagine a leader, or also imagine an HR partner. Are you focusing on individual growth, individual career path, individual upskills, reskilling? That's what I deal with on a daily basis. Or, and it's not or, it's and but that's the initial thing is it's either or, and then it's where you go, you remove the or, and do you focus on the team, how the team learns together, how the team mentors each other and grows together. It's not one or the other, it's both.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like a big shift where if you have a team that's not used to navigating, they're used to black and white, yes, no, either or.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about what skills are needed for the team and also the leader, whoever's holding the space for this. Like, what do they need to be mindful of?
Yeah. The focus on the task or the focus on relationships is also another polarity. And a lot of times we see a overvalue on task, plans, strategy, OKRs, right? All of those intentions that you build into the way that you run the business are important. And as important are the relationships, the way people work together, collaborate, they grow together, like we mentioned, all of that. They're both important. And the first inquiry is to raise that awareness that I would suggest to anyone that is listening is, are we polarized on one versus the other? Just because the way that you're running this business, right? You're running the business, changing the business, that's another polarity. Are we too focused on running this business and not focused enough on the horizon or where we're taking the business, so that we have the team today, like we say at Distinctive Teams, we have the team today that will be able to do the business of tomorrow, right? So you see how these are both important, and these are both aspects that you need to keep front and center and in some way integrated. I don't speak about balance. People think, oh, I need to balance this and that. It's actually not. That's not the right mindset. You can't balance a polarity. But what you can do, you can make sure that you maximize the upsides of the two poles, and you minimize the downsides of those two poles. And and there's ways to do that, to map that polarity that we're going to go into in a minute.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So what I hear you saying is that as a leader, it's really critical to even just voice the awareness of, I see that we're dealing with a polarity here. Even just that simple statement.
Yes.
This opens some space for people to have a discussion that is not making their case for one side or the other, because I think that's how those conversations generally go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so you change the tone of that conversation and the language, like you just did, of it seems like this problem requires us a different thinking, a different way of thinking and approaching the problem itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned working a lot with the teams at IBM, daily basis.
Yes.
Like, give us an example. Back in the day, give us an example of a time that you were working with leaders and a specific challenge, just to illustrate.
Yeah. One of the sticky situations was with a team that was an acquisition, a leadership team acquisition, a couple of years into the acquisition, and the team felt like this bubble within a big company. They were really struggling with the integration. They were really struggling with trying to create the third way of a culture that keeps the legacy of who you are as a company and moves you to the future into what this team now, what this company is part of, right? So you see how there's also a component almost of it, for this specific case, a component of identity in there, which kind of reminds me of the identity that we talked about in distinctive team of the ego. The ego, the identity, this acquired company was not bad. It was just the situation was just what it was. And it needed to be acknowledged. It needed to be expressed in terms of values. Remember the upside, those are values of that pole. And then on the other pole, there's the new company. Then there's the change, right? There's who you are becoming. And when we had this conversation about what happens when you stay this bubble in an environment, in an ecosystem that needs you to integrate, that needs you to evolve into the new state of things. And so things like we become too isolated, which is what prompted that session. We become isolated. We feel like we're like this. That's the other, the benefit of polarities. We feel like we're like this, and instead what the business is asking us to be is like this, integrated, weaved together. And then I asked, okay, when you look at what you're asked to be, who you need to become, what's the fear? And very quickly, the fear there, we're losing our own culture, we're losing our own values, we're losing our own identity, right? That was the fear, which is the downside of that pole. And so, all right, okay. So imagine this conversation where these parties realize, oh, I didn't see that. I didn't see. It's almost like I am sitting over here pulling them, this tug of war, right? I'm pulling them and they're resisting. That's what was happening. And then we said, but to be the company that you both want to be and to serve the clients, your stakeholders, the way that you want to do, who do you need to be? And then that's where you are in that aspiration of the third way, that more evolved way, the greater purpose statement of that team that was, we want you to keep who you are. We didn't acquire you to rip and replace because, you acquire a company because you love the company and you need the company and you want that company to run on those values of what makes the company itself. But what is the evolution of that in the way that the new company is asking you to do, and then the other way around, right? So that was a long example, but I think I've seen this over and over and there's more and more acquisitions happening in the way that these companies do business. Some you build, some you buy. And when you buy, you want that acquisition to be successful. And this is a very common way that the companies get in friction and they get stuck.
Sure. It's an M&A inevitability unless someone stands up and talks about or addresses it in the room. Yeah, and helps them.
And addresses it in the room and helps them see it's not my way or your way, is what is a better way.
Okay. So you talked about the polarity in the room run the business versus change the business. And so are those the only two polarities in the room?
No, there's so many. One is we talked about the individual and the team, or it could be a team and an organization. I'm thinking of the wider room, not just the meeting room, but as a wide organization. Another aspect that I touched upon quickly earlier was decision making. Do we take the time, make a quick decision out of, I don't know, sensing, intuition, or do we take the time and do the due diligence and assess the impact of our decisions and so on and so forth? That's another one. The task process I see in the room all the time. These leaders that come into the meeting and they go straight to business instead of checking in. Yeah. So the polarity of task over relationship. We actually used to create a about me type of blueprint that in leadership teams where you fill it in, and then in these leadership bonding type of offsites or meetings, you will present from that aspect. One of the few polarities were on that blueprint, because that's how you understand, you understand the person, because we all gravitate towards one and the other. And then we had this range between the two. And it was very interesting to see people that would put their mark, their pin on one of the poles, and the people that were kind of in between, where, well, depends. There's meetings that I open with, how are we checking in? And there's meetings that I just go straight to business.
Yeah. Well, it sounds really interactive, like the best way to solve this, not solve, but just lay out all of the details on a framework is... Yeah. To have everyone participate and bring their voice in.
Yes, because you want to have a conversation around all the different perspectives, and remember that they're there to listen to each other, and they're there to understand. Because once you understand that I actually need you, or some of you, meaning pointing to the other pole, to go where I want to go, to that greater purpose statement or greater good, then I am, we're side by side and we're looking at the same thing. Now, finally, we're aligned, and it together in creating what needs to be created that takes both of us and not just one over the other.
Right. Yeah. I can see where that will diffuse some tension, because you're no longer pitting department against department, or whoever, leader versus employee, or whatever, whoever is having this tension. You're looking objectively at how are we going to navigate, and here's the plan. Right. And here's where we need to catch ourselves, call out the truth of what's going on so that we can remain steady. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And, and there's always the case. And, I've been in those rooms like you have, where there's the person that weighs in heavier than the other, that is more outspoken than the other, that steals the airtime more than the other. And so that's where you're there, the navigating. It's like you were on a boat, but there's only one rowing. Where's the boat going to go? It's going to go in circles, right? So the same thing here, that facilitator, that leader in the role of a facilitator, makes sure that everybody has a say, that all the different perspective, again, we go back to different perspective. I always envision, when I do a perspective taking, I envision I have a pizza, and I have a pizza with all these slices, and I need to give away all the slices so that I can have the full pizza of perspectives. because, it's like every slice is a wedge and is one perspective, but I need to have the whole array of them to have the complete picture. So, that's we go back to what we started with the changing mindset and that adaptability that this kind of thinking is requiring of you. And guess what? Good news, we're not born with it. We're actually born with the other one, the one that wants one over the other, because that's how our brain works. But we can practice it. We can learn it, and it's a lot easier than we think.
It just sounds like it's a leadership competency, and not one that comes naturally. And you might have to convince yourself as a leader that this is the way. And then once you changed your mindset, you might need to actually get the rest of the organization on board.
You have to. Yeah. And that's the only way out. And sometimes it takes several iterations because it's not easy. And I totally, sympathize with people that may have tried and they didn't go very far. It's not easy to abandon one way that is not working for you anymore in favor of a way that you are just exploring and you're not sure about. But when you realize I have stayed on this pole for too long, and substitute pole with decision, tactic, plan, whatever the situation is, when you stay for too long there, that's how you end up dead. You died. That's the decline.
You're dead.
You're dead. You're dead in the water. You get stalled. You get stale. You get out of touch, right? When we stay for too long. That's just the nature of things. And that's why I love the metaphors with nature. Nature is full of polarities that we see them all the time. The seasons are polarities. You cannot have the beautiful spring blooms without the dormant time of the winter. The day, the sun, and the moon, we're surrounded by polarities.
Yeah. I've heard you say, when talking about this, that people coming into this need to have a sharp mind and a soft heart. Talk about that.
I love that so much, because it reminds me of the underlying polarity there, of the linearity, the critical thinking, the analytical thinking, and the sensing, the intuition, the wisdom that comes from, that gut sense, that gut feeling. They're both important. And a lot of times, and especially in the workplace, and especially in the type of teams that we work with, Cori, that are in tech, they try to stay for too long and overvalue or overextend in a way. So you appreciate more one versus the other. And if there's anything in the era of AI, and so that's why that critical mind and, the brilliant mind, and also the soft heart, if there's anything that we're learning about AI and the way that we collaborate with AI, because human and technology is another polarity. So the way that we create that third way is, let's keep valuing the linear thinking, the analytical thinking, and at the same time, let's not forget that when we think of qualities and values that are deeply human, the brain only does half it only brings half of that value. What is really deeply human is also these qualities that we have, technology at least today doesn't, of perceiving, of perception, of contextualization, of sensing what needs to be brought to life, to the light. So that's why I like this as a mindset for the type of leadership and the type of teams that we need today, of teams that bring both the deeply human qualities and the critical thinking and the technology that can do critical thinking a lot better than we can.
Right. But Claude cannot sit in a meeting room and point out that half the room is stuck on the one pole.
Exactly.
And they're getting
Yes.
emotional about it. They can't call that out.
Yeah. They can't. They can't because right now is still missing that context that comes with the human and with all the situations that the humans has been in prior to that moment, with just ways that our brain can connect based on what's already there and also what's new. You know, the insight, the eureka moment, the great brilliant idea that only when you bring the humans together with technology, you know, there's a really big part to play with technology, but only when the humans can orchestrate that. All right, do we want to show a framework?
Let's just jump in and take a look,
let's
because
just
we want to
jump
help you
in.
understand how this works and give you some practical tools. And you'll be able to download this framework for your own use. So let's share it.
Yeah, this is the map that we've been referring to.
Why don't you talk us through it?
And so kudos again to Barry Johnson, who is the mind behind this body of work. And this is the map. This is a polarity map. And you can see, and I'll try to describe it for listeners that are not just listening to us and don't have this map right in front of them right now. What comes to mind for me, there's a butterfly with a right wing and a left wing. If we start from the left-hand side, because that's usually where you start, those two ovals in the middle are what we call poles. Those are those situations where you find that ultimately underneath that perspective, there's the change that we were talking about versus the stability, the change and stability. Again, they're not in opposition. They are interdependent. And the very first thing that is important to do is to neutralize those poles. And that is you bring into the conversation with the team of removing any judgment, criticism, good or bad. So you make change for the plan, change for the strategy, whatever that change is neutral, has no connotation. You know, it's just the most neutral thing, which is very important because you avoid the contention in the conversation later. Okay, so, and you have the team agree, change, yeah, neutral enough, and then stability, neutral enough. And then you start with asking, when you stay for too long into change, what happens? What situation that happens? Teams people may say, we feel that we're burnt out. We don't even know anymore what we're working on, what we're producing, coding, because it changes all the time. Customer priorities change, our priorities change, you know, that kind of situation. Sure. And so you stay with that change.
The upside.
But what you stay with that change, what is the upside of change? You know, people know, like we said, it's great, we'll stay on top of change technology and all the new stuff. Great. Love it. Okay. And then when you look at stability, usually what comes first for people is the fear. What is the downside of stability? Well, we become obsolete, we don't grow anymore, you know, there's no opportunity for learning something new and all of that. Okay, great. And you write, right? You write these things. So imagine you have this picture on a flip chart or on a whiteboard, and you write these things that telling you, okay, great.
But and you start with the fear maybe,
You start
because that's the easiest thing. People, that's top of mind for people.
Is the easiest thing. They can always point the downside of the other, not of them, right? Because they're in the weeds. They're in the weeds, and they can even see it. But the other team can. The other people that are on that perspective sure can point out what's the downside. And so, but what is good about the stability? What are the upside of that stability? And so, and you go over that, and then they may say, there's a stable product, customer satisfaction, and all of that, right? Profit, all of it, and you write it down. Okay, so when you stay in the upside of those values and you minimize the fears of that downside, then that's when you said this green arrow, you create this virtuous, you go towards the virtual, the greater good, that the better way, the third way, right? When you're stuck in not moving, not being able to move because of those fears that are unaddressed, unspoken, then you go into this vicious cycle. That's where teams go into, the death that we were talking about, where nothing gets done, or one prevails over the other, but that is not the solution. Because you're going to be presented with the same problem 6 months after that, or a year after that. You're going to be again in this type of situation on the other side. So this is the map, and this is how you lead or facilitate that conversation.
Okay, I have a question about values and the upside. How are those related on the map?
Yeah, they're kind of the same thing. It's the upside. Yeah, just another way of saying the benefits, the values, the upside. The last
so not
thing
the values of the company or values of the team.
No.
Okay,
no.
Just clarifying.
When you think about a product that is stable, that has a market share, what is the value of that product? Customer satisfaction, reduced technical support or limited technical support because the product is so stable. Yeah, that's the value. One last thing that is important to add is when they have this picture, when the map is populated and you have all of these mile markers now, the values, the fears, right? Then the conversation goes, the early signs. How do we know? When we are too much on that stability and not enough on the change, right? So the product is not changing fast enough as we should. What are the early signs of that? Well, we're losing customers going to the competition because the competition has that new feature that we decided not to implement. Okay, great. What are the early signs of too much change? And it's time to kind of take things and get them stable a little bit longer. Well, we have all these technical issues. We can address problems fast enough with clients, and salespeople are coming and are yelling at us because the customer is not happy. So that's an important element of this conversation, because when you put that into the light and into awareness, then if that is happening, we're changing now. We're not waiting longer because we know what's going to happen.
Right. So it's just voicing what those signs might be and everyone agreeing. If I see this, if I see that your team start to just churn on one end of the pole, there's got to be hand raises.
Absolutely. And so you see how inclusive in a way this exercise is, because guess who comes before anybody else with the early signs? The opposite. Oh yeah. The people that want to change things all the time, they're so good at listing and identifying the signs of when things don't change fast enough, and vice versa.
Right.
So you see how it really brings people together, which is where they need to be to make the
Right.
decisions that they need to make.
But in the right
Yeah.
spirit, right? Not in a
Yes.
finger pointing or a blame way. It's,
Yes.
hey, we discussed these are the signs. We agreed upon these. No matter who's saying it, could be
Yes.
the team that's feeling stuck. But you're right. It is always the people on the other side who just
Oh,
have to point it out, but in a constructive way, right? It's not a blame. There's no blame
it's
in this diagram.
there is no blame because they know by now from the definition of a dilemma or a polarity where they're seemingly opposed, but they're actually interdependent. So by now, the team knows I need you. I need you and your early signs of we haven't changed things fast enough to make better decisions, to have a better product or whatever the polarity is of the day.
Okay, well, with that, so what do we have for leaders today? Like, if they have a polarity that they're thinking about in their work today, where should they start?
There's a lot of information out there. There's people that have studied with Barry Johnson that wrote their own books. There's other people that have wrote their own ways of navigating these wicked problems. So start with just go online and read as much as possible. Start with adapting to a new mindset. So now that you're aware that is not because you're not capable. It's just these problems require you to have a different thinking, a polarity thinking. Then there's awareness, and there's there's the mindset and the tool set, and there's very many tools out there. A way that we help teams is from that ego that I mentioned, right? The individual to the eco, to the ecosystem, to an individual intelligence, to a collective intelligence, from an individual accountability to a shared responsibility. So these are things that Cori and I love getting our
Yes.
our hands on. And help people bring these things to the light and to the awareness. Yeah.
And language too. I mean, you're not calling it a problem or an issue. It's something
It's
to be
not.
navigated.
It is a challenge. It's a situation, and we're surrounded by the situations. So don't despair. It's not because you did something wrong, but now that there is this awareness, then there is the framework, then practice. Bring people together and practice and have 3-4 good questions to ask. Go back to, the things that I have, the way that I navigated that butterfly, and have 3-4 key questions per quadrant, and then bring people together, and you'll see it's amazing how you can really unlock a better way of making decisions and doing business.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So where can people go and find this polarity map to download and those great questions?
We're going to put the link to this polarity map in the show notes. There's some material there that we have created for navigating the polarity of individual and teams, ego and eco, all of it.
Great.
If this episode resonated with you and this is what you're navigating, please let us know, because I believe, and from my experience of having been in these conversations with teams and leaders, that there is an opportunity here for a more dedicated class or a workshop where we can share, again, we can practice and we can share these tools so that they'll be part of your new adaptive leadership.
Fantastic. I think this is a much needed for people to bring into in their toolkit and bring it into
Yes.
the team to be able to step in and stop the cycle of these recurring tensions that don't have to be tensions any longer. There can be a good tension.
It's a good
It's a
tension.
healthy tension.
It's a healthy tension. So don't be scared about the tension. We need people more than ever. We need people that can hold that tension and create from that tension. Control and chaos is a polarity. So bring in, right, ways to control and ways to allow the chaos and create from it.
Thanks, Angela. This has been a
Thank
fantastic
you. This was
conversation.
fun. All
Yeah.
right.
All right.
Thanks, Cori.